The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Okay, well, let's unmute myself for a start. Good morning, CHD. It is Wednesday, July the 9th, 2025. We have a very important show for you today. We're going to start off in a minute talking about the rain in Texas, geoengineering and the flooding in Texas. Then we're going to go to James Lyons-Weiler, Dr. James Lyons-Weiler, and we're going to be talking about the plot to get Robert F. Kennedy Jr., super important segment. And then we're going to be talking to Kim, Alexis Budzon's mom. Do you remember, Alexis, we did this story while we were traveling around on the bus? We have an update for you on that. And then we're going to go for our unvaccinated story of the day. So let's start off with the rain in Texas. Let's bring on our first guests. Good morning, Rob Williams and Paul Bean. How are you this morning?
Morning, Polly.
Good morning, Polly. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So you guys are from our geoengineeringage.org. We'll talk about that in a minute. But this whole rain in Texas and now in New Mexico is causing massive divide everywhere. So we thought we'd get you guys on to talk about your side of what you think is causing, let's, for example, the rain in Texas.
Yeah, well, I can take the lead here. I think that there's a lot potentially causing the rain in Texas. We see people kind of pointing out that there's some cloud seeding operations happening in Texas, which is, of course, to enhance rainfall, specifically, apparently, for farmers and people that need it. And there's this young guy, Augustus DeRico, who's out there. He runs a company called Rainmaker. And a lot of people are really going at his throat, basically saying this was caused by you. This is your fault, basically. I'm not going to put the whole blame on this Augustus DeRico and his company Rainmaker. There are other cloud seeding companies. However, there is only one out there, Rainmaker being the one, where you have this young guy basically who has made a name for himself, essentially campaigning for cloud seeding. You've seen him in Florida during that whole debate there when they were trying to ban geoengineering, and they actually did ban weather modification and geoengineering. But he was there essentially lobbying for the cloud seeding industry, aka weather modification industry. And it's just interesting, right? Like, he's the only one out there who's really putting a name to face, and he's really pushing it. And I find it so interesting that he is kind of like this front for maybe a much larger industry. Like the cloud seeding itself potentially impacted the floods there in Texas. But I think there's a much larger scale project behind the scenes, if you will, behind the curtain, where levers are being pulled. And maybe Rob can speak to that a little bit more, but that's definitely kind of my take at this point. I can't blame him entirely, but if you have to get on and explain to everybody, hey, look, it wasn't my weather modification that did this. It wasn't me. I think you have a real moral dilemma there.
And is it true that this can actually cause that amount of rain? I mean, I live here in Texas, and I have never, since I've been living here, seen anything like that. And there was no warning, nothing.
Yeah, it definitely can. So there's a long history of cloud seeding specifically. Cloud seeding is probably the most basic form of weather modification, at least one of them. And I just wanted to share, this book here. It's called Howl's Storm. It's about New York City's official rainmaker in the 1950 drought. So this has actually happened before. There was this guy named Wallace Howell, and he was, at first, he was made out to be like this, hero. He was going to solve this big drought issue in New York. People were really excited about it. This new technology, right? This is so cool. And over time, he ended up just causing a bunch of problems. He flooded the city multiple times. He up in the Catskills, he caused all kinds of people didn't want to vacation there because there was an enhanced rainfall. There was floods, right? And I guess it kind of comes back to this question. And I actually debated Augustus Dorico in April. And I told him that this was going to happen and that there's a history of this and that he should beware. And I don't think he really has the entire picture. But again, absolutely, rainmaking is possible. We can do it. It's been happening. Funny enough, the first place that was ever done was just south of me here in Vermont, over Mount Greylock in Massachusetts. It was actually a project by General Electric and this guy named Irving Landmuir. And so this has been happening for a while. They've been trying to make it useful. And there's times when it can be useful, but what always happens is disaster at some point. It's always going to get out of control. It's always going to cause something, right? And that, again, it comes back to the question of who owns the clouds, right? Who has domain over the atmosphere and the rain and the clouds? If you make it rain here, is there a butterfly effect that affects, if you're making it rain over millions of people, there's going to be tons of butterfly effects that you really should have no say over. I don't care who you are, So anyway, yes, rainmaking is possible.
So Rob, the problem I have with all of this is it almost, and I'm not talking about you, Paul, I'm talking about on the internet and stuff, the debate about it. People died, children died. So this is to me, if it was that this is manslaughter stroke murder. I mean, we cannot be playing God with these seeding of these clouds or whatever it is they're doing when you've got these horrific pictures of people being swept away, and it's happening again in New Mexico. This has to stop.
It's sick, and I actually just saw something earlier today that there's maybe some flooding happening in Chicago. I haven't really been able to look into it yet. No, it is sick, and it's really it's sad, right? Again, how I discovered this guy Augustus is I saw him advocating in Florida, and look, a year ago or 2 years ago, we were covering this. Rob Williams and I have been working on this together for years now. And, I would get laughed in my face for suggesting that we could control the weather, suggesting it, we could make it rain. People would be like, yeah, right, man, you're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. And then suddenly, here we are a few months into the new year, and suddenly a pro cloud seeding and geoengineering organization lobbyist group has emerged. And I don't know, they're almost shameless. Again, if you have to get on a podcast and explain that, hey, if I was implicated, let's put it this way, if I was implicated in any way that a project I was doing was harming people or killing children, I would stop that project immediately. I would want nothing to do with it. Yeah, and I see you have pulled up here. He says that, we stopped basically 36 hours before the floods actually happened. And, and he says that's enough time. We didn't affect this. We only put out, and this is another thing he said, we only put out 65 grams of silver iodide. And, again, sure, maybe that's true. But again, you were still enhancing the rainfall 36 hours before a giant flood happened. So I don't really know how you can claim innocence here. I really don't understand it. And furthermore, I don't understand why you wouldn't say, you know what, maybe I don't understand what I'm doing. Maybe we can't control the weather as well as I thought we could. I'm gonna stop doing this.
Right. Rob, let's hear from you. I'd love to hear from you on your perspective of this whole thing.
Sure. Our 5-person team, Polly, has been talking quite a bit about Texas. And to enlarge the aperture for just a minute, I think cloud seeding, which is nearly 100-year-old technology, is a very small subset of a much larger geoengineering initiative that is military in nature and remains relatively under the radar, and has since 1978 with the passage of the Environmental Modification Treaty, which prohibited the military use of weather modification. So when we look at Texas, we look at the deaths of all of these people in Texas, we have to see this tragedy in this larger historical and environmental context. We have a legislation and laws now in place, weather modification acts and such things that bring to bear technologies much more powerful than cloud seeding with silver iodide. The use of electromagnetic frequency technologies, HARP being the pilot project in Gakona, Alaska, which dates back to 1977. The use of stratospheric aerosol engineering, cloud seeding, cloud brightening, cloud whitening, NEXRADs, which direct energy at weather systems that have been emplaced with nanoparticulate metals. So looking at Texas, let's see the bigger picture. Our sense, as Paul just mentioned, is that Augustus, Dorico, and Rainmaker are a bit of a civilian cloak, if you will, covering up a much larger and important story about the military implications and technologies used in these kinds of weather modification and climate manipulation projects.
Rob, what can we do about it? I mean, do you have hope in the new administration that they are going to do something about this?
That's a good question. Let me pass that to Paul, because I think he's got a pretty interesting take on this, and then I'll share my thoughts.
Man, I think we definitely want to do all that we can to push the administration into taking this seriously. RFK at HHS, this is a public health crisis. It needs to be addressed. And honestly, the president, President Trump, I think he might know more about this subject than we realize. But it is obvious to me that nobody in the administration knows the full picture, or maybe they do, and I just don't know. But it does seem like it definitely needs to be addressed. Do I have hope? Yes, I do have hope. However, I think we got to just keep doing what we're doing right here, which is talking about it, having these conversations, not being afraid to be called crazy. And I think that's really where we got to put our hope more than anything.
Yeah, and to expand on that, Paulie, if visitors go to our geoengineeringage.org website, you will see that for years now we've written public letters to the Trump administration, to the Biden administration, to the Vatican, to the World Health Organization, to the Hague, the World Court. We, in addition to our research and publications, we have been trying to engage a lot of these political players in this conversation and have a serious scientific conversation about what's going on. Paul mentioned RFK. Geoengineering is a public health crisis because geoengineering affects all living and breathing creatures on this beautiful planet of ours, including the plants, the trees, the water systems, the forests, the skies, humans, obviously. So this is, in a way, a respiratory crisis. This is a conversation about air pollution and nanoparticulates, including silver iodide, being used in the skies. So in terms of solutions and hope, it's really encouraging, Polly, to see all of these states embracing statewide legislation around weather manipulation and climate modification. We're not starry-eyed. We're not convinced that individual states can make this go away. But what's happening is a national grassroots conversation is emerging about the 100-year history of weather manipulation and climate modification. And that's incredibly exciting to witness. And CHD is right in the mix here, by the way. So thank you for that.
Well, we are children's health defense. So some people may say, well, okay, they're spraying the skies, whatever, they're making Maine, whatever. Because a lot of people, they have their own little things, their vaccinations, or whatever, their own little boxes they stay in. But this affects children's health enormously, does it not?
Absolutely. It affects the health of all living and breathing creatures. And when we look at the so-called wildfires, for example, that are breaking out all over North America, we know that the trees are literally suffocating because they've been coated over decades with nanoparticulate metals that desiccate, dry out the trees, cut off their ability to breathe. And this is happening again with the bees, the birds, the bats, the forests, the rivers, the streams. And there has been a robust, decades-long conversation, I would say, amongst concerned citizens about the geoengineering issue. And it's nice to finally see it surfacing. And it's nice to see thinking people across the political spectrum, true environmentalists, I would say, taking this seriously.
So if people go to geoengineeringage.org, what are they to expect? What can they learn? Do you do podcasts? What is it? Are you updating every day?
Yes, we have close to 50 peer-reviewed scientific papers available for free. We have 2 environmental histories, one on the history of geoengineering, the other on the history of electromagnetic frequency technology development. We have a number of podcasts that we ourselves host with leading geoengineering researchers. And we have guested now this year already, I think, this will be our, 8th national podcast. So again, it's nice. It's gratifying after years of work, Polly, to see his work getting out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Vitally important. Thank you, Rob Williams. And Paul, let's have a last word from you, please.
Yeah, no, I just, last thing I would say is there's this phrase that we should probably mention, which is weather warfare. And again, we should reiterate that the larger project is a military project. It's mostly a military project. It's about full spectrum dominance of planet Earth ultimately, and the United States. But we experienced a few floods here in Vermont. Actually, 2 years ago today, we had a 1 in 100 year flood, and then the last year we also had a 1 in 100 year flood. So it's very interesting. But anyway, I wrote an article the first time it flooded, kind of alluding to the idea, this is 2 years ago, that it could be weather modification, and I mentioned Gordon MacDonald, who was I'll read the quote here, and it's kind of important. Gordon MacDonald, who served on the National Science Foundation's advisory panel for weather modification from 1964 to 1967, had warned that environmental warfare could damage an adversary without revealing the aggressor's intent, and implying such techniques of war under cover of nature's irregularities presents a disquieting prospect. MacDonald also added, a secretly waged weather war never need be declared or even known by the affected population. It could go on for years with only the country's aggressors' security forces being involved or aware of it. The complex randomness of the weather makes accusations of aggression plausibly deniable. And Gordon MacDonald was a Harvard graduate, a longtime member of the Jason Scientist Advisory Group. He also served on the original Presidential Council of Environmental Quality for Richard Nixon. So just to give you some context to who that was. But I just think it's really important that we point that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both for the work that you're doing. And we will definitely check out our geoengineeringage.org. And we hope to see you back on CHD TV soon with updates of more things to come and what we can do about it.
Thank you very much, Polly. Thanks to CHD.
Okay. All right. Well, look, now we're going to move to Dr. James Lyons-Weiler. Good morning.
Good morning, Polly. How are you?
I am fine, thank you. It's good to see you. Now, I've got a couple of headlines, and I'm going to ask you to explain what all of this is about. A little bit confusing, but let's start off with your first, which is, I'm putting my glasses on here so I can read this properly. The Brownston, you wrote for the Brownston, and the article is coming up now, I hope. Well, anyway, okay. You wrote 2 articles, and you wrote one article for Brownstein. There you go, the plot to get RFK. So that created quite a stir. And then yesterday, the Defender put out an article. Vaccine lobbyists deny calling RFK Jr. a direct threat to public health and declare support for Maha. So I think you just need to explain absolutely everything to us so we can unravel it a little bit. Thank you. Right.
So back in April, very early in April, I received an email from a person who said, you need to write about this. These are minutes and action items from a meeting held by this trade association called BIO. They held a vaccine policy steering committee meeting. That's true, on April 3rd. And this committee meeting allegedly discussed a concerted, full-out, mature plan on how to have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. removed from HHS as secretary by September. Wow. And they also included a great deal of planning over messaging. They wanted to try to convince during this time frame the public that a resilient society vaccinates their children and their adults. They wanted to put out a plan so that Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s work was seen as posturing as opposed to actually getting commitments, for instance, from industry to change. Messaging, perception control, all the things, management of public perception rather than actually managing risk of vaccines, all the things that we've seen over the years. And in this document, it also says, well, who inside the HHS do we have, or in the executive branch, do we have that we might actually be able to tap to help be a rational voice in their opinion, and split and divide and conquer to help us with our agenda. And they mentioned some names there. This does not implicate Dr. Oz in the planning. This does not implicate Dr. Macri in this planning. Again, this is all caveated that this was leaked to me by a whistleblower, and I have two ways that I've verified that it is apparently real. One of which I can tell you about. The other one I cannot, because I don't want to reveal the whistleblower's identity. But the one that I can tell you about in terms of verifying that this is most likely real is in the document which I received in early April. They said, we're going to launch a program called Why We Vaccinate. And sure enough, April 24th, they launched a program, Why We Vaccinate. So that's pretty good validation that in early April, I had a memo that I shouldn't have had. Where it came from, I'm not going to go into that. There are other ways of validating these documents, but they want to control the public's perception on things like efficiency. Efficiency to them means that we have fewer safety requirements, that we get things done faster, right? In the terms of fast tracking things. They want people to feel as though they can trust them again without doing the hard work of making their products actually trustworthy, right? It's really clear that they're doing theater. They're planning and have been doing and conducting. And I've watched the behavior of messaging, anti-Kennedy messaging come out, including from Scott Gottlieb and others from the food industry, who was apparently co-opted to try to get the messaging out that he has no real agreements with industry. It's all messaging. It's all posturing, sorry. So Bio actually, for some reason, November, after the election, some pretty heavy hitters, vaccine makers left this organization. So there seems to be some kind of a schism within that led to some of these organizations departing, which I did not know at the time that I wrote this article. So it says that Pfizer and Merck are all there, and you can check the membership online yourself if you're curious. Listen, a lot of people have said, isn't this the same old, same old? Well, not really, because the message that I want to carry here today is we have a duly elected president who went through the process of nominating a cabinet member. That cabinet member was then confirmed by a duly elected Senate. Through the process of democracy and through nomination and hearings and vetting, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the Secretary of Human Health and Services. Sometimes I wake up and I still have to pinch myself, not because I don't believe he can do the job, but specifically because he is finally doing the job that should have been done all these years. So listen, is MAHA a cover for anti-vaccine? Well, MAHA can't be a cover for anti-vaccine. That's one of the participants, and Scott Gottlieb came out afterwards with the same messaging. It can't be just about vaccines. The Secretary of Health and Human Services is responsible for every single inch of territory in biomedical research, clinical research, translational research, and in the end, in ways that affect human health through clinical practice and medicine. So that doesn't sound just like an anti-vaccine position. It sounds like he's taking the job seriously. And I know he's very busy, very long days, and he's dealing with so many complex issues that that then to have to fight off this, pack of wolves that are going to come and talk to the Senate and say, we want to undo that entire process and get rid of this cabinet member, probably the most important Health and Human Services secretary in the history of the organization. I think it's time that we pick up our phones and we call our senators and we say, hell no, we want Bobby Kennedy at HHS. He's our secretary. He's the people's secretary. This is not political. He's an independent person. He's doing the people's work for us. We need him there so that he can invite the vaccine manufacturers to the table, as he has done with other industries, as we've seen with the food packaging and with the food industry and the dyes and the ingredients, the ultra-processed food, and get a commitment from them to actually address for the first time in 30 years, not just the perception of vaccine risk, but actually do their job, do the job that their investors expect them to do, which is to actually address risk. You see, they have a fiduciary responsibility in the market, if they're a publicly traded company, to their investors. And so far, what they've done is they've skated on the myth that managing the public's perception and understanding of risk is how they're handling their responsibility to their investors. Well, now the veneer is off. That's fraud. They actually have to handle risk. Otherwise, the SEC is going to come knocking on their door. Now that it's out there and we know what they're talking about, this is actually some pretty serious evidence. Through a court case or subpoena or a Senate inquiry to verify and validate who was in attendance, what they said, get them under oath to deny or not deny or to admit what they said, and then say, well, listen, this is evidence that you guys are managing the perception of risk of vaccines instead of actually managing the risk of vaccines. Do you know that that's fraud? That's securities fraud. You're misleading your investors the same way that Paul Offit is misleading customers to come into his little shop at Children's Hospital by saying aluminum is safe. It's false advertising. Well, guess what, guys? I don't think that this is going to be the last chapter in this. Now, the article that CHD, the defender, put out from Michael was a great article. The organization came out and they said, oh, hang on just a minute here. We never saw this. This didn't come from us. They outright denied. And that's a good lawyerly move. But then they did something that was wonderful. They said, we are 100% behind Robert F. Kennedy Jr. We're 100% behind Maha. Let's do this. Well, I mean, that's great. Let's do it. Come on. Let's plan the meetings. Let's have the meetings with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Send your people to his people and you do lunch. The fact is, we can now have a discussion about what it means to actually manage risk instead of pretending like you're managing risk and managing the perception of risk. Isn't that wonderful, Polly?
Yeah, great work, James. Really proud of you.
Thank you.
I think really interesting that they want to get rid of Bobby before September, because September, is it not, is the time when we're about to find out potentially what's causing this massive chronic disease and maybe the cause of autism or one of the causes of autism. So they are probably freaking out. I would be if I was the dark side.
Well, listen, corporations are organisms that think about their own survival, right? They're freaking out in a way that I think is healthy, if they're freaking out at all. And yes, September is a key date for a number of reasons. The kids are going back into school, so the public messaging about vaccines will influence uptake. The budgets become established and confirmed, right? So the Health and Human Services budget, they don't want it to be Bobby's budget. They want it to be somebody else's budget. I don't know who. But unless and until they come to the table with a frank plan to make their vaccines safer, as I've said for 10 years now, and I think one of the first places I said it was on CHD TV early on in our interviews, it's only a matter of time before every single American figures out about the lies and how they've been misled and how their perception has been manipulated. And they figure out for themselves the high cost of vaccine injury in terms of disease burden, injury, and deaths. And when they figure that out, they're going to have the exact opposite reaction. I can't find people that say that they trust the CDC, that they want the CDC and the FDA to help hold their hand as they go through their medical experience. And there are a lot of people who are actually now afraid of going to hospitals. And that's an earned reputation. So there is no, winning trust back. Trust is earned. So the entire pharmaceutical industry, entire big medicine industry, and vaccine manufacturers included, and especially now have to act according to regulatory principles that have been in play this whole time, and stop playing charades and stop hiding things. Stop analyzing the data 20 times and only publishing the one result that you want because that's the one that shows that your vaccines are safe. Stop cherry picking and p hacking. And we've come a long ways, and it's absolutely through the effort of every single person who is unafraid to speak now. I was on an interview the other day, and I said, well, since they chose the date of September, why don't we choose the date of September? If you're a pediatrician, pharmacist, if you work for a pharmaceutical company that makes vaccines, if you know better, if you're a doctor of any stripe and you know better about vaccines, let's choose September 1st where you all come out at the same time. I'm calling on every single person who knows about the lies of vaccines to put your career on the line like many of us have and come out together on vaccine risk, vaccine injury, and vaccine death, and put an end to the denialist agenda once and for all. And the way that you can do that is to call your senator now and say, I'm a doctor, I'm a scientist, I think Bobby Kennedy's the right person for this job, and then make a public announcement. Listen, what's happening at universities? Your administrators are freezing you out from applying for $38 billion of NIH funding right now. So all the academicians who know, what do you have to lose? Do you think universities can hold their breath for 4 years without NIH funding? Because that's what your administrators are putting you up to do. And if I were a research grants administrator at a university and I knew I could only get 15% instead of 60% overhead, I would encourage my PhDs and MDs to work together to put out more grant proposals, not fewer. If anyone's interested in finding out how to apply to NIH in an effective way, if you want to come to me and learn how to speak Maha, I'll be more than happy to coach you on the agenda of the NIH, where Jay Bhattacharya is likely to go, research proposals that are likely to be successful across all areas of medicine. And, I'm just a PhD, though, so you have to bring the medicine.
You are the amazing Dr. James Lyons-Weiler, for sure. Now, how do you say people can come to you? How do they come to you? It's IPAC. Give us all the ways that people can follow you or contact you.
Just send me an email at info@ipak-edu.org, info@ipak-edu.org, or go to my Popular Rationalism Substack, and find us at ipa-knowledge.org. We do independent research. We teach courses at ipak-edu.org. You're welcome to come on over. And we have so many projects going on. That's the Popular Rationalism page. There's another whistleblower who just contacted with me with information. We can talk about it next week, maybe, if I come forward with it. I'm not sure. But I held on to that email from April until September, until now, the end of July, beginning of July, I should say, because we needed to have a national discussion about what the pharmaceutical companies are actually planning and how they're meeting behind closed doors specifically to oust Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Please, people, contact your senator. You know how to do it. Go to your favorite search engine, contact my senator, and send a message. It'll take 3 seconds. I love that Bobby Kennedy is the Secretary of Health and Human Services. He's doing a great job. Let's keep them in spite of this bio baloney.
Brilliant advice, brilliant education. Thank you. Yes, let's get you on again next week. So thank you very much, James, for everything that you do. Huge.
Thank you, Polly. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Now we're going to bring on Kim, Alexis' mummy. Hello, Kim. Good morning. Thank you for being so patient, waiting, and thank you for coming back and talking to us.
Oh, it's a pleasure and an honor.
Well, Kim, let's remind the audience of what happened to your beautiful daughter.
Alexis was in her final semester in college. She was 2 weeks from graduating with her Bachelor of Nursing degree. This photo is her and her very close friend, celebrating after their first year. I think it shows her vibrance and her, she's just stunning. Came home for Thanksgiving, not feeling well. We did have her into the doctor a couple of times. We had her into the doctor, emergency care, and then followed with an ER visit that went south very fast. She had pretty much multiple system failure. I continued to do research. I don't have to do it as often as I did because speaking from a layman, it took me about 2 years to really search her ER report. And from there, I called doctors. We have a lawyer doctor team. We were able to file with the vaccine injury compensation program on the flu vaccine only. The COVID is all pending. We are gathering evidence and all of the expertise that has looked at her file do agree that it was the 2 COVID shots and the flu shot that sent her into this state. So what we've really focused on recently is the blood. She had the 2 key common denominators in all of her symptoms is thrombocytopenia and disseminated intravascular coagulation. And this is basically where your blood is clotting and hemorrhaging at the same time. It is extremely hard to treat. So we keep going. We keep looking. We try to get the word out, but what we are looking at is that etiology and the mechanisms, the pathophysiological, hard for me to pronounce all these words, what causes all of these symptoms of myocarditis, all of her liver enzyme, I mean, everything pretty much comes back to her blood, which is very concerning. So the focus, on all of these things, we need to know what the root cause is. So, the neonatal deaths, the maternal deaths after delivery, and these mothers pretty much bleeding out, we need to know the root cause. So that's where we are continuously going, is searching for that cause.
So I think just because maybe some people in the chat may want to know this. So we'll post Alexis' story that we did when we were traveling around. We'll post that in the show notes so you can go and have a look at it. But she had 2 Pfizers and then she had a flu shot like a month or so afterwards, correct?
Correct. She had a quad flu shot, which is 4 strains of the virus. They give that generally to people that are 65 and older and to medical healthcare workers. She tolerated a quad flu shot back in 2018 when she was starting the nursing program and going into, they always have to complete is it the CNN program? I don't remember. But she tolerated that flu shot. So that's why they go back and they say it was all 3 shots. She tolerated that back in the day.
And so Alexis went to nursing school. She wanted to help other people. She was not anti-vaccine, as I'm sure you all understand.
No, she had concerns. She wanted to wait for more reliable data, a critical thinker. She didn't just go do something because everybody was doing it. She was actually researching it. And her concerns were at that time reproductivity and long-term effects. She had some concerns. But in order to complete her precursor, now they did say that they did not have to be vaccinated, that they would make other means, but that would involve traveling 2 hours to a different hospital that didn't require it. She had gotten the precursor, the floor she wanted, the department she wanted. It's not just an easy thing to walk away from. And she was 2 weeks from graduating when she passed.
She was 24 years old. She would be, what, 27 now?
She'd be 27, yes.
I mean,
so
it doesn't get any easier. I mean, the pain.
It doesn't get any easier. I mean, there are good and bad days. And you just, I go back, Brianne Dresden. I remember her Zoom call when she was on with the doctors. And they were discussing with Peter Marks all of the issues that were going on, and they were just being pacified. And he said to them, well, if you can come up with some terminology for me, like thrombocytopenia, well, that's an issue. They knew. Thrombocytopenia is pretty serious in this.
Now, Lou, if you don't mind pulling up that picture of Alexis, because Alexis is jumping up in the air with her bestie friend.
Yes,
and
that's who she stayed with. They finished their semester. Her friend, I try to avoid names for...
Don't say her name. So if people who don't know, Alexis is one with the darker coloured hair on my right.
With her pink stethoscope.
And
so,
then that friend, and a friend
recently there was studies that came out, the Harvard Yale study that was looking at long COVID or as a vaccine, long vaccine. And after Alexis had passed, in contact with her mother, her daughter had developed rashes that were they were similar to Lexi's. I wasn't there to really examine them to see if they were the same. She had reactivation of the EBV, the monovirus, which are markers of this new study that she probably also was suffering a vaccine injury. So that was kind of mind-blowing. And that just kind of came out in March of this year. So there are a lot of people out there, a lot of people that have no idea, that some of the things that they may be going through health-wise now could most likely be associated with the vaccines.
I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to that have whatever long COVID is, and they're all vaccinated. I mean, I did a question. Does anybody know anyone that's got long COVID hasn't had any shots at all? Because I find it, and they're just, the doctor's like, oh, long COVID is just a natural thing that you get, often in the unvaccinated. No, I'm seeing completely the opposite. It's a vaccine reaction is what I think.
Yes. So also she went in because we were concerned about her blood. I was saying, check the D-dimers. We were really actively communicating to see what was going on with her. And they also did CAT scans and MRIs, and they found a pituitary tumor, which can be congenital, but she's had previous MRIs and CAT scans, and that tumor was not there. So you've heard about the hospital that has 10 nurses that now either have brain tumors or brain cancer. It's phenomenal.
So Kim, you're out there, you're like this fierce advocate and stuff, and you talk about Alexis' story and things like that. Do you find people coming to you with their stories now? Are you learning?
So back in March of maybe January of this year, when kind of Facebook was lifting the censorship, I was able to post her story, and wow, the reaction was incredible. People going, we knew her, she was super healthy, we always wondered what happened, and then other people coming to me with their own stories. And we were never anti-vax. We would never harm people with misinformation. But following James here, wow, that was pretty incredible. So you're looking at this generation. I think Mary was on not too long ago talking about the voters, the young voters. The young voters are your high school students that didn't go to school. You have your Gen Z and your millennials that were ostracized, for going out and spreading this virus. So those voters are very aware of the censorship that was going on. And the only reason I knew that everything was being censored is because I was doing my own research. I had to go very deep in my research and be very specific with terms and things that I was researching. So, the younger generation, they're very aware of what is going on.
Kim, you say that you were pro-vaccine. I was pro-vaccine before my son had his injury. Now that you've done the research that you've done, and you've gone down that rabbit hole and you've heard from these people, either on CHD or wherever it is, I was shocked. I thought it was just the MMR because that's what happened to my son. And so had another child and continued to vaccinate. Why? I mean, who wants polio, right?
Right.
And then you hear from all these parents around the world that there's reactions and death to every single shot out there. So I'm
And every generation.
Right. So
Every generation. So, you know, I think when we did our last filming, I said that I would never get another vaccine. I am still not an anti-vaxxer by any means. But with the indemnity of the pharmaceutical companies, with the CARES Act and the PrEP Act, protecting these people, and the things that we have uncovered, unless that is removed or changed, I would caution parents. Caution. I'm not going to tell them not to vaccinate because it's a personal choice. But caution, or at least know what to look for, because they are not providing the information, you know, to people of what the events that could occur with this. It's absolutely insane.
This is really where I am with the whole thing. So how about this? Look, we're not here to fight you. We're here to warn you of the real dangers of vaccine. If you want to take a vaccination, knock yourself out. I have a massive problem with someone under 18 who can't potentially make the right decision for themselves. I think that's child abuse. Now that I know what I know, because of all the dead babies, the parents that I've interviewed with dead babies, with dead toddlers, with dead Gardasil people. It goes on and on and on. And I'm now sitting here with Kim with a beautiful dead daughter from vaccination. So if you want to take a vaccination, knock yourself out, but just know that we tried to warn you, and that the real fact is that you could die, your child could die, they do die. They do have autism, or whatever they want to call it, with the injury with their brain spell, or like Alexis, yeah, they do die of, I would think, not a particularly good death. So know that people like Kim and myself and the millions worldwide that have vaccine injured or dead children are trying to warn you, literally not fight you. We're exhausted.
So the recent thing that they've come up with is they've got a black box warning now on the vaccines for myocarditis. I haven't seen the black box. I don't know the verbiage, but if you remember back to the opium pandemic, there was a black box that went on to the medication, and it was worded so that, oh, you could take it long term, this could have happened, blah blah blah. It wasn't enough. And how many years did this go on before it was actually realized of what had happened to hundreds of thousands of people? And that's just a drop in the bucket compared to all of the people that took these vaccines that were not aware of all of the side effects. I was going to read over her ER report. I'm going to read over the ICD codes. Her ER report was over 600 pages, which is probably why it took me 2 years to go through. But we have Budd-Chiari syndrome, compression of brain death, cerebral edema, acute respiratory failure with hypoxia, unspecified coma, ventricular tachycardia, encephalopathy, Takotsubo syndrome, urinary tract infection. But when we talked on the show, I went and got the blood and urine and the reports. There was no bladder infection. Acidosis, hypersmolatility, and hypometremia, anoxic brain damage, not elsewhere specified, diabetes insipidus, arrhythmia infectiosum fifth disease, which they didn't find anything in the CNS fluids, cardiac arrest to underlying cardiac condition, epilepsy unspecified, not intractable with status epilepticus, generalized skin eruption due to drugs and medications. That is the livedo reticularis. That is where the blood that is blooding and clotting in your capillaries, it's already made it to the capillaries, shows symptoms of this. Adverse effect of other systemic antibiotics, primary thunderclap headache, fatty change of liver, contact and suspected exposure with COVID-19. Of course, they have to put that in there. Thrombocytopenia, unspecified. Elevation of levels of liver transamines levels. Diarrhea, vomiting, parlor, and they had put a personal history of COVID-19. So Alexis, being in the medical field, probably was exposed to the COVID virus in her work clinicals. She worked. So she never tested to see if she had COVID. And that's where I said in the film that it was important that if they mandated these healthcare workers, they should have been looking at their antibody levels before they ever mandated them to take a shot.
Kim, you're doing amazing work fighting for your daughter, and do keep us updated on CHD TV.
I will, and it's not my fight. It's not her fight. I'm fighting for people out there so that they don't have to go through what we've gone through.
Well, Kim, we're so grateful, and we're so sorry about Alexis. It's such a terrible loss for all of us.
Thank you, Polly. It has been an honor to be with you again. I just love the work that you guys are doing.
Thank you, Kim, and we'll see you soon on CHD TV.
Okay, sounds good, Polly. Have a great day.
All right, everyone. Well, I have a couple of things to say to you before we go to our unvaccinated story of the day. And so Friday, I'm going to be hopping on with Brian Hooker, and we've got something to tell you. It's kind of exciting, I think. See what you think on Friday. And then after that, we're going to be playing another Gary Null movie, Our Over-Medicated Children. This is really, really important because these kids these days are being medicated for ridiculous things and with dire consequences. So please do stay tuned for that. And this is Friday. So Brian and I are going to be chatting with you about this thing that we think is quite exciting, but see what you think. The other thing is we got a conference coming up, everybody. It's going to be in Austin, Texas, my land, where I live, November the 7th to the 9th, 2025. That's this year. It's going to be super exciting. We're going to be doing stories. There's going to be some great speakers. There's a lot. So Stephanie Lucretia is heading this up. She will be coming on to tell you about the speakers, and it'll just be really good to see you. And I really hope to see, I know a lot of you who told your story to me about the COVID hospital protocols. I'd love to see you down there. We haven't forgotten about you. We still really do need to push Vax 3 and get your stories out there, and we will do that. And maybe next month we'll go back to concentrating on those awful stories. So do know that we haven't forgotten about you. I'd love to see you down there, and the military as well. We want to see you as well. So do keep sending your stories in to stories@chd.tv because like Kim, you can come on, you can update us on your story. You're desperately interested in the vax unvax home studies and the unvaccinated. So do contact us, contact Naomi, and she is at stories@chd.tv. So thank you so much for listening. Pray big, stand firm. Never settle. I'll be back tomorrow on Financial Rebellion with Catherine and Carolyn. And here's our unvaccinated story of the day. So this is a happy story. God, we need that. You can't tell you. What's your name?
Misty Murphy.
And you are?
David Murphy.
Misty Murphy and David Murphy. Okay, how many children have you got?
2.
And how old are they?
22 and 16.
And they've never had a vaccine in their life?
No,
ever?
No.
Vitamin K?
No.
Why?
Because I worked for a chiropractor from the time I was 16 until the time I had my babies, and she educated us on the dangers, and so I researched for myself, and we chose to go a different path, despite having no support from family, and family being all medical minded and not supporting our decisions.
All right, now tell me about your children. Mm-hmm. Are they on medication?
No.
Any anxiety medication?
Oh, no. Our daughter's 22 and she's lived on her own for 2.5 years. She graduated college early. We homeschooled all the way through and traveled.
Do they have autism?
No.
Do they have lots of ear infections?
Never.
Okay.
About as healthy as you could get for kids.
Are they paralyzed anywhere?
No.
I mean, this is what we're dealing with every day.
I know, right? Every day, it's what you're talking about. Yeah.
Did they have speech delay?
Absolutely not.
Did they have speech delay?
No.
Did they have measles, mumps, rubella, chicken pox?
No.
So they didn't even get the illness. They got nothing.
No, and we went to a chicken pox party and didn't even get it.
That's what people don't realize. People are like, it's so infectious, you're going to die. Do you know how hard it is to catch measles, everyone?
Yeah.
I went to loads of measles parties and disappointed my parents by not catching them.
Right?
That's what it was like in those days.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, so they're alive.
They are alive, and they're well traveled and been in lots of countries and nations that vaccines were required, and they didn't have them.
How did they get through COVID with the peer pressure of get COVID shot? How did they get through that?
Well, My daughter is director of operations for Chick-fil-A, and she just said she wasn't going to do it, and she didn't do it. She didn't put her mask on, and she did not take the vaccine, and she encouraged other people that she worked with to not take the vaccine. And my husband works in a prison, one of Ohio's prisons.
Do you?
Yes.
And
What do you
he
do?
didn't
Wait.
take it.
What
okay.
do you do in a prison? That's
I'm
fascinating.
a network administrator now. So I've been here 23 years. And when COVID came, it was just, it's obviously went through the protocol of, masking and testing. And they didn't require a vaccine. They weren't going to require it, but they highly encouraged it.
What about the inmates? Did they have to have the shot?
They didn't have to have it.
Thank
There
God.
again, I mean, they're incarcerated, they're
strong-armed
stuck, and
them.
and it was, highly, obviously, if you want to say highly encouraged to take it. So, I mean, the majority, I think, did do that, but, for the most part, they're under custody and control, so it's kind of like, hey, here, we're offering you this, just take it, and most of them do. So, it was a lot of like I said, the masking and stuff was pretty much everybody. I didn't, or as best as I could. For the most part, I was like, I didn't, and they wanted to test all the time. They did have different protocols between people who were not vaccinated and versus vaccinated.
The badge colors were different.
Yeah, they actually did have created a badge if you had your vaccine. And I just told them from the very beginning, even from the testing standpoint and from the vaccine part, it's like if it becomes mandated, then I'm done. So I guess we'll just cross that bridge when it happens. We never wavered on that, and we've had many discussions about that. As far as what we would do and that kind of a thing, I just didn't worry about it. It is what it is. So.
But you didn't get the shot.
Oh no.
And you didn't.
And you
Well,
didn't
did they
test.
make you stick that thing up your nose? The PC.
That's what they started with the test of doing that. They want everybody to test once a week, and that you had to do it. And if it came back, of course, if it came back negative, positive, all that, whatever happens with the protocol. And that's the first thing I asked when they asked about the testing, because it would be like, well, if you refuse and you're sent home, of course, there's a disciplinary track if that follows. If you do it, basically you'd be fired within a week if you refuse to test. So let's just.
He forged his
Let's
tests.
just say there's many ways.
We're live.
Let's just
I
say
can't
that you
edit
can,
that out. Okay.
there's many ways you can
Dear
take
God.
a test. So
All right. Anyway, moving on from this
so
subject
moving
right
on
now,
there.
because children's
Yeah.
health do not support fraudulent activities.
Yes, no, we didn't. I didn't forge anything.
No.
I took the test.
Okay. All right. Good. Oh no, wait. I was going to ask you a question. I've completely forgotten now. Oh, do you think? Oh, are they already bringing masks and getting hyped up, ready for the?
They haven't yet, although what I have noticed is, though, they were doing the fecal matter test. So they instituted
The
testing.
poop test. Do you know about that?
Through the waste. Did you know that? So they instituted a, and I know several states were doing it. I know when they would they would test the wastewater.
Ew.
They
Yeah.
would test it. They were saying that they could, determine through the wastewater testing, like potential outbreaks. That was their
The prevalence of COVID
yes,
in the
So they were
in the
actually doing
fecal.
that. I've
Oh
read
yes,
about it.
they were testing, which we didn't know at first. So they
Yeah.
had been testing like for over a month when they finally told us that, hey, we're doing this. My point in saying this is now, so here we are, 3 years or so, 2.5, 3 years removed, and we still have now up where the main lobby is where everybody comes in, that they're still doing the wastewater treatment as of now, or like as whatever levels are okay. So but it's still there as a, hey, you never know.
But we're not going to do that again, are we?
Oh, we're not.
No, we're done.
So I hope so.
Yeah, come on, we are.
Hope so.
We are.
The American people are just going to say no.
I hope.
Yeah, we do.
So.
Anyway, this
Yes.
is supposed to be a whole thing about how healthy your two children
Yes,
are. And then,
right.
Well, it was just fascinating you work
Yes.
in prison, blah, blah. What else do you want to say?
Well, our daughter was also in college in 2020, just finishing. She was a commuter, so she did not live on campus, but she was a student athlete and played soccer. And she was one of only 2 girls on their soccer team who did not get vaccinated and refused to mask and vaccinate. So she was not allowed to travel on away games to a couple of their games because she wasn't masked and didn't test. So she went through that. And then our son, 16, he worked at Chick-fil-A, a different Chick-fil-A than his sister works at. But he was the only one at his store that didn't mask, and they made him work outside. He was not allowed to work inside during the time he was working when masks were required. So that's.
But
how
your
he
children
worked.
stood firm.
They stood
Yeah.
firm.
That's pretty impressive.
Yes. And my son's club soccer team, when they were trying to make us sit in the boxes and stay 6 feet apart.
Outside.
We didn't participate in that. We sat wherever we wanted, and we were ejected from several fields for not masking and not sitting 6 feet apart. So, and our kids lived, and they can still play soccer.
Somehow they survived.
Yeah, that's right. And you're all going forward like that.
Yeah.
And
Our
they
son actually just had knee reconstruction because of a soccer injury on June 14th, and so that was our first experience with hospital protocol since COVID.
Well, actually, no, it was before when our daughter.
Oh yeah, she got hurt first.
During the whole COVID,
Yeah.
when it was still big in the hospital, she dislocated her elbow, so she had to be taken by squad to one of the local hospitals in Columbus.
And she
it
refused
was-
a mask in the squad.
and said
Even in
no, and-
immense pain, she refused it. And then we got in there, they wouldn't allow him to come into the hospital, even though she was crying and screaming for her dad. They would not allow him to come
So
in.
she just refused to put the mask on.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
walked into the hospital. Because at the time I didn't know. All I got was a phone call. Said she'd been taken to the hospital. She was at a trampoline park and didn't know what was wrong at the time. So I left work and drove to the hospital and just parked in the emergency room and went in the
They said because
emergency
she was an
room door
adult, he
and-
couldn't come in.
And so I walked in and the girl was processing me over. Of course, the security guy wanted to make a big issue of it, and so did I. So,
Who won? You or the security guard?
well, I didn't go in, although where he told me to go, I didn't. So we kind of had to go, I think. He told me I had to leave and go back to my car, and I said, I'm not leaving. So if you can make me leave, then I guess I'll leave. But otherwise, I guess we should probably just sit there. So that's what that ended. So,
Nice.
But she did get her, but she got her treatment. It wasn't smooth. It was a fight. It was arguing with a lot of people and fussing about me not wearing a mask and then trying to kick me out while I was sitting in there with her. But she did get the care she needed. And then our son just had his first real go around with allopathic medicine and surgery. And we actually had to fight for our son to not receive a donor tissue from an unknown donor for his knee reconstruction. They needed to take a part of his part of a hamstring to reconstruct some stuff. And we had to find a different physician who was willing to take his own hamstring and harvest his own and use it, as opposed to a vaccinated donor
Well, we didn't know.
that
He
we
had no
wouldn't
idea.
know, and they
That's right.
You have
couldn't.
no
They
idea.
wouldn't guarantee us it was even a male. So we're like, we do not want female tissue being used on our male son. They couldn't do that. So we finally found a physician who was willing to do the surgery using his own tissue, and that was crazy. But we got it done, and he's recovering well. Didn't need blood products. We had to sign all this paperwork saying we did not want any blood products. We didn't want any emergency administration of blood or tissue or any of that kind of thing. So
It took a lot on her part, though. There was a lot of research and things to do, like what to do with the paperwork, what to put on the paperwork when you're, filling it out, adding your own section in there about, we refuse this, or we definitely do not want this. Make sure you're not, different things like that they, want to push on you afterwards. It's not either in the print or whatever. So making sure you try to have all those bases covered and just not let them bully you into doing what you know you don't want to do. And you have to stand and just put your feet in the sand and say no, and dig in. And at the end of the day, though, you have to be able to decide if it comes to it, what are you going to do, and have that and know what you're going to do if the answer is not what you need.
I think we had a lot of practice when our kids were growing up, because we had devised many plans as to what would happen if we were put into a situation where somebody told us our children were going to be removed from us, or my dad's a nurse, an RN, and they disowned our family. My parents have disowned our family.
Disown your family because they're not vaccinated? Wow. Can they see how healthy they are?
They could see that the whole
Good,
time.
yeah.
And
Well, they never agreed with that lifestyle,
at the
but
beginning of
COVID really
they
just,
disowned us completely and made it known that they didn't want anything to do with us, that they were ashamed and embarrassed of the way we acted and behaved. And
we took a stand, though. We took a stand with the protesting and the things. What everybody, I think a lot of people didn't want all the mandated stuff. We didn't feel it was that was right, and we just took a stand on it and said no.
But we
and they
had
didn't like
all
that.
those years from our daughter started out, she went to a private Christian school, a kindergarten and first grade before we started homeschooling. And so we had learned then, they told us she wouldn't be able to attend school if there was a measles outbreak. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. If you all are vaccinated and my kid's the only one not, how come she can't attend school? Aren't y'all safe? You know, it didn't make any sense. And so we knew from kindergarten forward we would have to have a game plan should the need arise to either escape the United States or get away from medical tyranny if somebody tried to impede upon our lifestyle. And so when COVID happened, we had been in Canada when the lockdown initially started here in the United States, here in Ohio, and our children, it was the first time we had left our kids by themselves, and they weren't kids.
Sorry, COVID's our fault.
They were 19 and, 19 and 13. And so we had to go through a big process to come back into the United States because that's the first week that the lockdowns had happened. And we knew right then and there, we're like, well, everything we planned for, we might just have to be doing it now. Might have to be escaping. But then our escape route ended up closing and being worse than the U.S. So I don't know. That plan backfired.
Yeah, I know what we're going to do. Okay, well, look, thank you. It's been really good fun talking to you both. And yeah, well done you guys. Well done.
Thanks. Awesome. Thanks.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.